Hello and welcome to CoProduce Care. Today we have the wonderful Neil Eastwood with us today, and he is the recruitment and retention guru and author of Saving Social Care. So it's quite a big thing that he's purporting to do there. Really excited to interview him. So I think without messing around anymore, if you could just introduce yourself, Neil, and tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry and what you do.
Sure, yeah. Hi, Sophie. I think it's been an interesting journey for me, and the whole trigger for it probably was being brought up in a vicarage, in the 70s when you had to kind of social care was the responsibility largely of well, people like my dad, I guess. So I was brought up with that kind of world, not a commercial world at all. Anyway, I did lots of different things and then worked in healthcare and then accidentally took a job with it was at the time the largest home care provider in the UK, and didn't really realise it was social care at all, but yes, ended up there, and that was like 11 years ago.
Right.
And then you know, when you join social care, you rarely leave.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it?
So yeah, when I joined there, they had a very high staff turnover, 10,000 staff, probably about 97% staff turnover, so almost everybody was leaving every year, and I was horrified, and I thought, we've got to do something. There must be something we can do. So I went along to different events. I couldn't find any information, so I thought, well, I'll try and figure it out myself.
Wow. So then you worked a little bit, so now you do a bit of consultancy. So you found a formula.
Yep.
Say. Yes, very confident. Yes,
yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so I don't,
it.
I mean, it's not like, is there a formula? It's really, there's certainly the application of best practice techniques. I think, though, every setting has its own challenges.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about, where we are now in Bristol, it's an urban environment, and that means it's going to be younger demographics. People are going to be moving around more. There's a lot of choice potentially of applicants, but who do you pick? And then if you go to rural areas, so I spend a lot of time in Cornwall, we'll talk about that a little bit later, and there it's quite a rural area and there aren't so many applicants. So it's actually, they're delighted to have an applicant, whereas perhaps it would be different right here. Yeah. But you would apply the same kind of approach and technique to improving recruitment, and then if you look at retention, that's largely driven by who you recruited in the first place, plus some other stuff on top. So the two are very connected. Yeah,
that's fascinating. So what we're going to do with this interview is, so we've gone out, this is how we want to do our co-produce care chats, trying to find out what people want to know about retention and recruitment. So I'm going to pose some of the questions that people have come to us about, and then we've got some ideas, and then we've got some prickly questions, which are a little bit contentious, hence the cactus. Prickly questions, cactus questions, this is what we're calling them.
Perfect.
So I'm going to kick off with, so when I put it out on social media, people were interested about something you're developing called Care Friends.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to know is what it is and when it's going to be released, and what's the vision for Care Friends?
Yeah, so Care Friends has been about a year in gestation, and what it is, it's an app for employee referrals in social care. The reason is because employee referrals are the best source of quality staff. They always are the best source.
So I understand. So people, like refer a friend.
Yes, but basically turbocharging, digitising and using gamification.
Oh, wow.
So in most cases, if you ask care staff, support workers, care assistants, whoever, nurses, they love their job and they would want other friends to work with them. The friction that's holding back large numbers of referrals is the employee referral scheme itself. It's not top of mind, it's a bit of paper you have to go and fill in, you don't hear what's going on, it's very frustrating, it's boring, it's no fun. And so I looked at that process and thought, if we had an app, because the majority of care staff have a mobile phone, that's the ubiquitous piece of IT, we can be confident that they have, can we give them something that engages them and brings to life the employee referral program? So you would get points, so like all good gamification, sort of, using game techniques and elements in a business context. And you would have a leaderboard, we have a leaderboard, but the primary motivation is really that you would be rewarded instantly in this time of instant gratification. You get awarded instantly for doing things prior to hire. So in most cases, most employers make the mistake of saying, I'm only going to give you the money, Sophie, that you've recommended to somebody. I'm only going to pay you after 3 or 6 months when I'm super convinced that that person's right. Meanwhile, they are spending thousands of pounds with Indeed or an internet job board for what guarantee exactly? So they will speculatively spend, but when it comes to their employees, they want to guarantee, and that doesn't send a good, trusting message out.
Yeah.
And we know from research that employee referrals turn up for interview. We might talk about interviewing in a bit. They turn up for interview and they're much less likely to drop out early because they've got a friend. And so there's many reasons why employee referrals are so well suited to finding people with the right values. And what I wanted to do with Care Friends, and we still are stumbling along, we're learning, making mistakes with it, but we have it in beta trial now in Cornwall. We want some EU funding to do that. For those of you who don't remember the EU, oh no, it's still there, it's still going on, it's still going on.
Yeah.
So they asked us to pilot this particularly in Cornwall after a successful initial pilot. So the idea is the care worker, the care assistant support worker, has the app, identifies them as belonging to that particular organisation. Jobs are posted on the app. You can, in 3 taps, share the job with a friend.
Oh, okay.
Either directly if I knew you through SMS or through WhatsApp, or I could post on Facebook with a message saying, come and work with me at this organisation. People apply on a little application form on their mobile phone. It's not an application form, it's just an expression of interest. And if you share a job, then depending on how you set the points up, you could get some points for that process. You would definitely get points if someone applied. So if you're minding your own business doing something else, and you saw that I'd ask you to, inquire about this job working with me, and you filled in the application, I would immediately get points.
Wow.
So I would now be building up points, and then you come for an interview and you're successful, I would get more points. You start work, there's a chunk of points you get. You stay 12 months, you get more points. I get points. So I'm building up a bank of points, and I can convert them into cash by tapping a button.
Wow.
Goes into my payroll.
So do you have to get a certain amount of points before it goes to cash, or is every a point is a penny or something?
Yeah. So the currency is interesting because we started with, and we may stay with, a pound. A point is a pound. So that's simple, right? But there is, a ubiquitous use of loyalty cards.
Yes.
And they are, apart from Nectar, which is half a pence, everyone else is kind of 1 pence. So if I said, you got 3 points, that doesn't seem much in the context of all the other. So we're looking to see whether the currency needs to change. But it is successful, it is working. And we do have one more element as well, which is an important element, and that is there's a bonus of points if I recruit somebody who's new to care. So what we're trying to do is encourage values-based recruitment in the community. So if I found you and thought you would be great, not because you happen to work at a care home down the road, but because you have the right values, I would get rewarded more because I've added 1 to our workforce.
I mean, I haven't heard about that at all before, and from the sound of it, it sounds like it could be a game changer.
You're right, yeah, and so it is a simple concept, which I think is really important. It took me kind of 10 years to think of it, which is embarrassing. But
no one else has thought of it, so don't give yourself a hard time.
No one's thought of it,
yeah.
So and then it's all about the execution. So we've involved. I did focus groups with support workers, another one with home care workers, and with care assistants, because I needed them to be absolutely telling me. I couldn't assume, even though I thought, I kind of understand this world.
Yeah.
I wanted their voice in what should the app look like, what should the points be for, and how should the rewards work. So we tried to involve them as much as possible, and we did a pilot of a prototype, and then we just did it stage by stage. And I'm quite impatient, so it's been very slow. But now, particularly in Cornwall, we've got probably about 20 providers using it.
Wow.
And we've started recruiting. So the exciting thing is, so it's been going now maybe 5 weeks. Because I expected that you build an app and it's all perfect and there are no bugs, and then all your testing is what people think of it. But actually it became a kind of buggy hell of stopping and starting and something falling over and we can't work out why. So I've kind of learned a lot. And I remember going back 10, 11 years when I worked for my home care provider thinking, oh, it's so exhausting dealing with all these people. If only I could just do tech, which does what it's told.
Yeah.
But actually tech doesn't either. So we've learned a lot. But in those last 5 weeks, we've probably got about 450 care staff using the app. And in 5 weeks, we've had probably about 60 applications and 8 hires already. So thinking that hiring, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that you have to get through, once they've accepted the job offer, of course, in England you have DBS, and then you have reference checking, and the whole thing takes too long. So the hires are always going to be lagging, the applications. So we haven't got enough data yet to say, have we got robust ratios that we can say to any organisation, if you put this in, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
But what we do know is it is improving employee referrals. It does remove the friction. And what every care company must do is have a bedrock of their staff out in the community finding people to come and work for them. Because if you go back to the 1990s and 80s, then about 80% of recruitment was through word of mouth and employee referral. We need to go back there. But I think the app can potentially help us by making it more fun and engaging. And nowadays care staff are working more hours because the organisations can't find people, and often they don't want to let any of their clients down. So you see the hours of work going up and the stress on care staff going up. They don't see their friends as much. So at least this way you can reach them without actually us bumping into each other and me then remembering to ask you.
Yeah.
So we'll
It
see.
takes out all of that issue, really. And also I think for some companies, especially when I work at, is the conversion rate of getting all of those applications in and then getting bums on seats and actually getting people through the door and actually working for you. Because you can go through a lot of applications, go through hundreds of them, and then you can go whittle those down to interviews, and you still only end up with 1 or 2, if you're lucky, who will actually end up employing. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you make a very good point, because what you've hit on there is really what I call the difference. And this is one of these kind of, kind of truisms, is that really there's only ever 2 kinds of applicant. There's active job seekers who are looking for a job. They have their hand up, they're armed with a CV, and they're probably on an internet job board. And then there are those people that are minding their own business and haven't thought of care, but they are potentially wonderful future care staff, if only we found a way of reaching them. So the active job seekers are a kind of shrinking pool of people that is highly visible to every care provider and Tesco and Lidl and Aldi and anyone else that wants to hire them, and it becomes a race. And if you're a busy registered manager and you don't have time to react instantly to that email coming in, then you're on a losing streak, because it's dropping away. All the chances of you reaching them are low. A lot of active job seekers as well, we know, are churning between providers quite regularly for whatever reason, some of them not good reasons. So those people are automatically not necessarily so loyal to your organisation. But if you find someone in the community and you persuade them they would be great, give them the confidence that they would be great to work it in your organisation, then you kind of have a lot more inbuilt loyalty.
That's so interesting. And I'm going a bit off this piece now, but it made me think about one of the questions I have actually, is the whole idea of how we are viewing social care and the perception of social care in the media. I was thinking back to the Queen's speech we had recently, and there's all talk about fixing social care and the problem of social care. And when you're thinking about attracting that new talent, that new blood, if you like, into social care, if you're just going off what the media tell you, then you think, well, why would I want to work there? So sometimes you are relying a lot on someone to say, well, actually, I work here and it's fine and it's great and I'm enjoying it, and that word of mouth. So that's going to become even increasingly more important, potentially.
Absolutely. And I think so we do have a lot to overcome in terms of a negative perception and all of those issues that you've already mentioned. And the most convincing person is someone who's a friend, who's a trusted source of the truth, who says, look, I do work here. Yes, sometimes there's challenges with personal care and unsocial hours, but it is the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. And that speaks to people much more than an advert of any kind, and more than a national recruitment campaign or anything anyone else, the government or anyone else, can do, because it's all about one-to-one personal relationships. And I think, and that is the way I believe we will improve or in any way try and match the demand, the growing demand for care, is to reach out into the communities and use those networks. And the prime amongst those are the employees. There's nearly 1.5 million care workers, support workers and care assistants. Yeah. Imagine if they were out there looking and persuading people.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So in the initial prototype we did with Care Friends, it was a very small pilot, but we got a third of the workforce recruiting. If you extrapolated that, it's very difficult to say that would happen at scale. We're trying to make it more effective, but we would have filled every vacancy in social care within 3 months.
Oh, goodness.
Now, those people will stay longer as well. So what we're looking to get from the app is some data around tenure. We do know from normal, traditional employee referral schemes and employee referrals, those people stay between 25% and 2.5 times longer than someone who didn't know the organisation.
Wow. And is that research that you've done, or just because you've been working in the industry so much?
Yeah, I've done some, but it's other people's research. So there's also academic research. So there's been quite a lot done in the States because it's the biggest social care market.
Okay.
Also, there's some in this country. Skills for Care have done some work where, for example, they did a lot of interviewing of care providers with less than 10% staff turnover, which is super aspirational for most care providers. And they found there's a high percentage of employee referrals. And what those organisations said is their number one source of staff to improve retention, to keep this retention, is staff referral.
Oh, perfect. So it looks like you're on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, there's many a stumble though. So I'm not being complacent, but I'm really excited about the potential of it. And if it can make a great difference, then that'll be fab. And so what we sure we do is keep the price really low, so that any care provider can afford it, not just a few.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's the aim.
Exciting. So the other question that we had is your role as Department of Health and Social Care Advisor.
Yeah.
And what you thought about the recruitment campaign. So I think you were saying earlier that you were in the recruitment campaign, or you were supporting with the campaign we had last time, because you had 2 lots.
The first one, yeah.
First one, and the second one they've got out at the moment. Every day is different.
Yes.
I don't know how successful they've been, but do you think that they've had an impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge. This sector is a challenge if you are government for a whole range of reasons, but one of them is that it is not like the NHS or teaching or prison service or anywhere else where the government owns every stage of the process. So, kind of the nurses are employed broadly by the NHS. So there's complete kind of ownership of the system of recruitment. One of the big challenges with social care is the government can do quite a lot up here. It has the ability to, has the tools at its disposal to do a large national campaign, which is what it's doing. At some point, if it is a recruitment campaign and not an influencing one, then that applicant journey goes dark side of the moon. So someone will have to then apply to an individual provider, and then, as far as government is concerned, they have no visibility on what happens.
It's gone. Yeah.
So one of the frustrations is it's not a command economy where we can say to every provider, you must tell us exactly what happened. There are thousands and thousands of providers. If someone applied as part of the campaign, were they hired? What happened? We don't know. So that's a fundamental kind of flaw, I guess, with trying to measure the success of a national campaign at scale.
Next question from our social media is praise. A lot of praise for your book. As soon as I put that out, they were like, amazing, Neil, great book, fantastic book. So I want to know a little bit about what prompted you to do the book and what the main focus of it is, and the kind of feedback that you've had, because it's saving social care.
Saving social care.
So that's the title.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been. I think it was driven. The book became about because I often was asked to speak, and I only have like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, and there's so much to talk about that I thought I've got to get all this out there because I think it can all really help people. And I had so much research, and I'd spent a long time trying to come up with this sort of pattern and the themes from it. And having been a provider, I knew that we couldn't deliver in an academic or theoretical way. It had to be very practical, written from the point of view of a busy manager. What can I do now? Open the book, I need to get some value immediately. So I decided Christmas Eve 2016, I thought, I'll do it. So I had a couple of glasses of wine on Christmas Eve. I thought, I'm starting now. Wow. So I did. And I wrote for 3 weeks. And the general rule is, so the publisher subsequently told me, is that roughly a novel is 80,000 words and a business book is 40,000. So it's half the length. Anyway, I powered on to about 45,000 words. I thought, oh, I'm done. Wow. And so I sent the manuscript to the publisher and they said, really interesting. So love the content, don't really understand it, sounds good, but it's way too long and all your chapters are the wrong length and the structure's a mess. So you need a book coach. So I was like, oh, okay. So it's actually very formulaic to write a book. So that was my first one, so you can probably tell. And maybe the last. And so the chapters all have to be the same length, and there has to be a very set structure to them. And then there has to be a journey. So you're taking the reader through a journey. And that's quite easy when I thought about it, because it's really looking at where do we find the candidates. So who do we want to look for, and how do they apply? So where would we go and find them? Then what's the experience of applying? And then when they accept a job offer, how do we start keeping them more effectively from that point all the way through to working for you for years? So it was a really interesting topic. In the end, it took 6 months. And I remember when you print out 40,000 words, it's a big stack of paper and you have to go through it. I reviewed it 17 times. Goodness. And still at the end of it, I found spelling mistakes and I started hating it. But it did come to life and it got a really good reception. And
really good. I find it really interesting and I like the way that you have addressed so many issues and kind of looked outside of the industry and what it's doing and the stats. And one of the really interesting things that I found from it is you split up the people who come for interview into, or work in social care, I think it is, into 5 demographics. Yeah. And it's those demographics were quite interesting. I read it, working in social care, I was like, yeah, that's actually really spot on. I could see my staff coming into those demographics. And I wonder from a recruitment point of view, would it then be to seek out those demographics in order to get those people in, or it's just a really good way of categorising who's coming into the industry and where to find them, if you like?
Yeah, I think if you imagine it so social care has no problem, it doesn't need any, in theory, marketing because it has no problem finding customers. So there's enough customers, right? So the challenge is all on the supply side, all on the staffing. So we need to use marketing techniques in order to attract our staff more than our clients, because there's more than enough of those that we can't possibly service them all. So the more a provider and a recruiter understands who am I trying to target, what buttons should I press? So for example, it classically used to be a kind of 20 to 39-year-old female demographic group was the kind of bulk of the sector. But we need to diversify because that particular demographic group is not growing fast enough to meet the demand of, let's say, ageing population. So you can't rely on that demographic group. They're important, but what about men? What about active retirees? And in fact, millennials and younger people have a very different outlook now to that I when I was looking for work first of all. So it's very important. The more you understand about who you're talking to and where you can find them and what buttons to press, then the better chance you are of actually talking to them in the first place. And as they join you as well, what are their needs, work-life balance and so on. So it's really all about understanding effectively what I would see as our customer, which is a future, member of staff.
What I like about that is very person-centred. So in terms, because you also do consultancy, what are the main issues that come up again and again amongst people who are recruiting for care staff? Are there any solutions to some of the main problems which you feel are like kind of no-brainers but people just don't automatically think of because they're just working day to day trying to get new people in?
Yeah, I think that I would say recruitment is cited more often as a problem than retention. Generally, and it is a general rule, is that if you're a not-for-profit or if you are a single site office, you will have a lower staff retention problem, a lower staff turnover. And if you're in an urban setting, you're a multi-site, you're not a not-for-profit, you're a for-profit organisation, it all gets harder.
Okay.
Typically, the staff turnover numbers get higher. Just the way it is. People don't feel perhaps as connected. But I would say fundamentally people are now seeing it's a recruitment problem because you're going to get staff turnover. You can reduce it as much as you possibly can, but there's always going to be people moving for reasons that are nothing to do with not liking your job or whatever. So it all comes down to a recruitment problem, and the most common issue I hear is we haven't got enough applicants, and the quality of those people is questionable. And a lot of that, you asked what simple things can we do. I think there is an over-reliance on internet job boards. It's a lazy way of recruiting, and people are busy, so it's very easy to put an advert on a job board and then you might get something back for it. In almost every case, the highest quality sources of staff are the slower delivery. So I like to think of it as a sort of sugar rush. If you want some instant hit, fine, put an ad on a job board, but you will get, you're going to be hiring probably 3% of those people. So you get indigestion actually just processing those people and the frustration of trying to reach them in the first place when they've applied. And in many cases, there's a high no-show rate. So the whole thing is painful. So what we need to do is change around what we do and measure success, not on the volume of people that are coming in or that you have in an inbox, but who stays a year. And the more you learn about who stays a year at least, the more it can influence where I should go to find those people in the first place.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love the idea of calling it a sugar rush and those kind of like digestive type connections. But presumably that will be different as well for different organisations, because there isn't, I often think with recruitment, apart from Care Friends, there isn't a one size fits all, because you'll have different values, you'll have different locations, and like you say, if you're urban or if you're in the country, it's such a different change.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you did mention in your book is the idea about motivation. And actually, how would you recruit motivated people? Because you mentioned that 60% of care workers going into care, they go into care because they are motivated and they want to care, which I think is pretty much true. Especially the ones that stay on. So it's almost like, well, you need to recruit for motivation, but how do you spot that? Yeah,
and so I think in terms of the cohort of staff, then we think probably 60% have this calling for care, and then another 8% are probably wanting to become a nurse or move on, but they still do have a calling. So that actually we're over 2/3 of people who should be in the sector. Some want to leave for good reasons. As soon as they join, they're looking classically for a nursing role. But yeah, how do we find those people? So I think motivation is really a function of them having the right values. And time again, people describe themselves as having some kind of calling. They might say it's a sort of personality thing, but mostly they just feel like this is work they should be doing. So what we need to do is find those people in the community, and the way you can do that, so active job seekers are putting their hand up saying, I need work. Right? That isn't telling us much. And in fact, nothing on a CV will tell you about whether that person's going to be a success or not. Maybe if they've job hopped and you can see that on the CV, that might be negative. But broadly speaking, your CV is no help to you. So what we need to do is find people who are demonstrating values in a measurable way already. And those might be people who are caring for a loved one. So caring for a loved one is the number one source of high-performing care staff, that they have already cared for somebody or have a brother or sister with a disability, for example. There's some connection with caring, and in the case of younger people that succeed, very often they've grown up and matured earlier than perhaps they would otherwise, because they've had to care and they've had to be responsible. So we need to find caring people in the community. So family care groups are a great example of where you might go to find those kinds of people. And then we would look at other factors like volunteering, giving your time. We know as well, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but we found a strong correlation between looking after an animal of some kind, particularly, strangely, horses and dogs. So in my informal polls of people in social care, we see about 10% more own a dog than the average in the population.
That's an incredible thing to actually research.
To ask.
Because you wouldn't have thought, okay, well, let's see how many people have got pets and we'll see if there's a correlation. It's quite interesting that they actually came up. But you think about it, caring is caring.
Yeah.
So you've got responsibility, look after somebody who's vulnerable, then it does make sense.
Thinking of someone or something else other than yourself.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so I've got some more I got really late in the day. So, how do you get people to actually attend scheduled interviews? So, there's this thing where you'll put out a lot of, I think I mentioned it before, you'll put out all these, you'll have a lot of interviews, you put out your job ad, you'll get stuff back, and then you'll wait. And nobody turns up for the interviews. And sometimes you'll have a whole day of interviews and you might have scheduled or maybe one turn up, and it's a huge waste of time, and it must be, if you calculated it, it's got to be a huge waste of money as well. So have you got any ideas of how you might deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think no-shows are, in and of themselves, they're kind of more irritating than fatal, but they are really annoying, and I think and that makes managers feel the whole recruitment process is a stress I don't want to go back to. So it's a critical question. It's probably the most popular question I get is like, I've got this no-show rate of, and it used to be a year or two ago like 50% of no-shows. It's now worse, I would say. Worse than that. So how do we fix it? Well, I think the most important thing you can do is to change the source of those people in the first place. So a lot of the reason you have no-shows is because people are active job seekers, being chased by lots of providers. They've applied for 8 jobs typically at a time. So now the clock is ticking, and other people are trying, providers are faster than you, or even after you've spoken to them have turned their head by saying, come over here and see us.
You've got to be quick off the mark then, really.
You have to be very quick off the mark. But I think weaning yourself off this sugar high of digital candidates with no connection with you is the fastest, well, it's not fastest, but it's the best way of gradually moving no-shows in your favour. Example being employee referrals, which I know I'm kind of obsessed about them, but they no-show about 2 times out of 10.
Okay.
Versus 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, maybe 10 times out of 10 from other sources. So the first thing you should do is look at where you're sourcing from and saying, maybe I need to diversify. Then, as you've said quite rightly, you need to be super fast off the blocks, texting them, calling them as soon as you hear of them, and then you can try and get them in as fast as possible. That will shift things as well. The time of the interview is a critical factor. So we have, the research I personally did found that 5 o'clock in the afternoon was the top time. I did find more research from the States, a much bigger cohort than I managed. So 10,000 hourly paid employees, including the care sector, but also hospitality and other hourly paid sectors, employers. They timed it or tested it by the hour, and they found 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night had a 20% lower no-show rate than any other time of the day.
That's incredible. And it kind of makes sense. If you're working anywhere else, then in the evening or really early is going to be the best time, but then businesses don't open, they're 9 to 5. So it's actually, it makes total sense. I think I did either read or something on Twitter where someone was saying they're trialling doing interviews in the evenings, which I think is I think that's a really good idea. The only thing I sometimes think when you have no-shows and trying to chase them, I wonder, are you sometimes dodging a bullet because you're
no-shows?
And also if do they have that motivated ethos in the first place?
True. I mean, if people no-show, are you going to beg them to come again?
Yeah,
it's a good question. I think there's more you can potentially do. So even communicating with them, we know that texting them the day before, saying the words "good luck," you'll be meeting me, good luck, and your name, gives people confidence. We do know as well that using the word interview frightens people. So thinking of this cohort of, let's say, return to work, mums or dads returning to work, perhaps they haven't been in the workforce for a while, or they're retirees, they're quite frightened about the interview process. So a very clever guy in the US home care sector told me what he does is he chats on the phone first of all before he's going to invite them in for the full interview. And they have a nice chat about what they're interested in and would they be right for care and a little bit about the company. And then he says at the end of that call, just to let you know, you've passed the first interview.
Oh, wow.
And then they think, oh, I'm actually invested in this process now. I'm already, it's like having your coffee card already stamped.
Yeah. So you think, well, I've got to go because I might actually get the job now. And that's a really good idea.
Simple
It's
thing.
so simple. It's fun. I feel like I need to take notes. It's fine, we've got it recorded. I'm going to ask this. So the all-party parliamentary group on social care. So this is a group of MPs from different parties that come together, and there's APPG is the short name for it, and there's APPGs on lots of things like human rights and disability and probably shipping or something. And they come together and they'll do calls for evidence and kind of reports and inquiries on different subjects. So this one on social care, this APPG on social care, they did an inquiry. And they went out to care workers and people who run services and academics, and they came up and they looked at retention and recruitment of the specific around the social care workforce, and they came up with the idea that you need to think about elevation, registration and standardisation of the sector. So I wondered, out of sort of those three, or maybe you think all of those three are kind of the way to go, do you think would be good in sort of getting more people into the sector, or just making sure that we solve this recruitment crisis that is here or coming or whatever?
Yeah, so I think, prime amongst those is the concept or the discussion around registration of care staff. So can we professionalise the workforce by giving them a kind of a protected title for which they have to achieve certain qualifications, and then it's a register, and then you can get taken off the register if you aren't suitable. So I think the registration process, the concept of registration is great from the point of view of changing the perception of the public. You do need, though, to have some kind of marketing budget to let the public know what's happening, so it can't just quietly happen in social care, because I think the primary benefit of it is going to be making care staff believe in themselves more. They often describe themselves as just being a care worker or a support worker, and that's a shame. So professionalisation and registration is broadly a good thing. We have to be careful with the detail. So, for example, if you make the qualification criteria too academic, we might frighten away people that would be wonderful care staff that just simply don't want any kind of training and so on. And you do see, as people get older, they're a bit more resistant to training and so on. And I don't want a career, and I've done all of that. So we have to be careful that we don't frighten people off that are already in the sector or feel they've now got to jump through some hoops. It's very important that the care staff themselves aren't asked to pay too much money for it. As little as possible, because obviously, it's another cost. And probably the employers would pay it. So I'm broadly for it, but I think we have to be cautious that it doesn't restrict the types of people. And I think a good example is nursing, where, in my personal view, making nurses a degree level qualification was a mistake, because I don't think academic qualifications indicate whether you are a caring person or not. And I think they're trying to unravel that issue by bringing in sort of the nursing associate role again.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be cautious. I'm broadly supportive and positive of it, but we just need to be careful with the detail.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to our cactus questions. And for anyone who doesn't know what our cactus question is, there are just a couple of prickly questions about social care that we're going to ask people that we interview, and they don't really know necessarily what we're going to ask them. But I think we've been quite kind to you, Neil. It's not so bad. And we have our resident cactus here.
Yes,
so there we go. It's really cheesy, but hey ho. So the first one we've got, which isn't too bad, it's quite interesting. How can you avoid unconscious bias throughout the recruitment process?
Yes, it's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
I think people do say, if you're recruiting friends, that's biased because you're kind of not opening it up to everybody. I think as long as your advertising is available and open to everybody, then I think it's fair enough to use other sources like employee referral, because you're just trying to get as many applicants in as possible.
Yeah.
It is true that there is a challenge, I think, with some, let's say, registered managers who might think, I want someone who's already qualified for the role. So if I had to say what bias do I see most commonly, it would be, we want someone who's already a care worker or a support worker.
Yeah.
And I think that is a mistake, which I do challenge regularly, because often the types of people that are already in the sector, they have their own way of doing things, and they bring habits and different values that don't necessarily suit you. We do want to get away from, and this is a longer standing challenge, is the perception of care work as kind of gender stereotypical work. And so then we think, well, how can we get more men into the sector? And when I talk to men who work in the sector, it's very interesting how they describe social care, the work they do. They don't often say the word care. And that could be, through this issue of associating, it as a female kind of sector profession. And I think using the words help and support are more commonly the language that men perhaps would use. Try to, as we said, don't just go on a job board. And actually, if you advertise on a job board, an internet job board, you are biased towards the young. So older people much less likely to go on a job board, more likely to to be a face-to-face or word-of-mouth thing. So really, in order to remove bias, you need to diversify your sources, and also open your minds up to people that are not already in the care sector, and try and see people's values. And values-based recruitment, which Skills for Care are excellent proponents of, is the way to do that, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely see that more people are talking about values-based recruitment, but sometimes it's hard to know what that means. But another discussion for another day, I think. Okay, the next one is: do you feel that that the NHS steal social care staff?
Well, I think it's a good question. Is the NHS a friend or foe as far as recruitment is concerned? I mean, certainly social care has been the kind of unloved stepchild of the NHS for a long, long time. And that's a frustration for me personally, that the NHS has a brand and social care is thousands of different brands, and so we're always going to struggle with with, say, for example, the TV casualty and all of these, everything is kind of worshipping the kind of angelic image of someone working for the NHS, and so we suffer because of that. I think the closer we can work together, and the more that we can, and we're starting to do this, connect career pathways so that you can go from one to the other, then I think that's probably going to be the answer to it. It is very difficult for social care because the NHS often will get pay rises where we can't necessarily afford it, because the two funding streams are very different. But I think there's a lot to learn for both organisations, both sectors, and the closer we work together, probably the better it will be.
It's really interesting you should say that, because I read the State of Care that the Care Quality Commission puts out every year, and in that they said that they really rate highly providers across the piece, health and social care, who work collaboratively. And one of the things that they mentioned was, I don't know if it was an example, I think it might have been an example of somewhere who had looked across the piece of health and social care and got a career development map from social care through to health and the NHS and what that might look like. And I can understand that's a really attractive way of doing things. It seems really progressive and it's collaborative. But at the same time, I know that would really make a lot of providers in social care nervous, because you automatically think that's it. I can almost say that my staff are going to move off in a couple of years, and then you think about continuity of care. So I think there's like a fine balance with that one, especially if you've got a home that's older people that has nursing as well. That's probably a little bit even more contentious.
So nursing is really where the rubber hits the road here, because there's 40,000 or so nurses in social care, and so nursing homes do struggle, and I think we need to look at this differently. So So we have a lot in social care, a lot to offer that the NHS can't offer. So you would have more autonomy, I would think, than you would do in a kind of typical NHS secondary care setting. You also have something really powerful which we don't sell, and that is if you are a nurse or a support worker or HCA in a hospital setting, you only see your clients, the people you're supporting or caring for a very short period of time. And of course we're trying to make that faster, that they're staying in less and they get back out into the community. You don't ever really see the impact of the work you do, apart from unless you're like in acute care. So what social care has this wonderful opportunity to do is for people in social care to see over time the impact of the work they're doing on the improvement and the rehabilitation of the people they care for. That's such a powerful selling point. So I think we shouldn't be frightened. We should embrace the fact that we should work, as you say, work more closely together, but understand why social care has something different and better in some cases to offer people as a place to have a career than the NHS.
That's really strong, the whole branding of social care.
Yeah.
So the last one is, do you feel that some social care managers are part of the reason why staff leave? And if true, do you feel that too many managers are potentially quite poor?
I think a lot of the time, so we've done some work on leadership and there are other organisations and entities that have done more than us. So when you look at a care setting with multiple offices or sites, then you do see often a big difference in staff turnover. And so you would logically say we have to attribute that to the responsibility of the manager. I think, and we know from research that having a very collegiate and open management style suits healthcare settings. The types of people we're recruiting are vocational. They're often low self-esteem, low self-confidence people, very sensitive to relationships. And so the more kind of autocratic your management style, the less likely they are to like it and fit with it. What we've seen, and I think a lot of managers, and I've met so many now, even if they are displaying what appears to be an autocratic style, it's often driven by the pressure and stress on them, not that they are people that are broadly unpleasant to work with or work for. So what we need to do, I think, is support our managers. And in many cases, managers get promoted up from, say, care roles, and they're not given the support by the sector and by the employer in learning, say, blame-free language, conflict resolution, the soft skills. Yeah. It's very much they've been promoted because they've been a wonderful caring person and they've gone down that path. We need to support them more as a sector. Yeah. And I think looking at ways of taking the pressure off this kind of single point of failure in the care sector is the registered manager. They should be registered. We were talking about registration a moment ago. We should register registered managers. It sounds illogical to say, but that they are not registered, and I think they need more respect from the healthcare profession than often they sometimes get, and they need more support. And by doing that, you will find that the management style will change because they will have the time to say thank you to somebody for doing something. They will be able to show appreciation, which is the number one thing that care staff crave the most. And I think so what we might see as a symptom of, in some cases, staff saying it was a very unpleasant place to work, I think a lot of that can be dealt with by not changing the people, but by supporting them and by removing pressure from that point in the system.
That's fantastic. And I think there's so much now where people are thinking about well-being and well-being of staff. And I was speaking to another registered manager, and they said that sometimes you are, like you say, propelled up the ladder because you're good at certain things, but then you reach the top and nobody prepares you that you have to then oversee absolutely everything, and that in itself is so daunting. So it's nice to recognise that it's not necessarily that one person, it's almost systemic, and valuing the job that they do.
And certainly I think recruitment has a part to play in that, and what I hope my work is doing is trying to give managers some support and understanding of how to do that a bit better. And otherwise, no-shows are frustrating and wind you up. Staff saying they're going to join, you roster them in and they don't show up, or they join and then leave immediately after training, and you have to kind of take a sort of heave a big sigh and go back into the recruitment process again. Recruitment is not helping the stress level of managers. So we need to improve that. And obviously, if your staff are stretched and you don't have enough of them, then you're going to have a lot more staffing problems. People are going to go off sick more and are going to experience stress themselves. So I think recruitment and retention, I personally, in my own little way, I have a mission to try and give them as much support in that one area as possible. They've got lots of other things going on, but recruitment and retention is now the number one pain point, and I hope I can do something to help it.
So, say I've just watched this video and I am totally in love with Neil. I think he's got so much to offer. How do I find out more about you? Where can I find you?
So the book you can find on Amazon, but savingsocialcare.com is the website for the book. Stickypeople.co.uk is my kind of consulting and screening work.
Great.
And then carefriends.co.uk is for the employee referral tool.
And that's how you can find out more.
Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm going to be increasingly putting more and more of my research onto particularly LinkedIn. So if you can find me there as well.
And you've got Twitter at Sticky People, is that
At
right?
Sticky Neil.
Sticky Neil. Okay,
Yes.
Great. Brilliant. Well, we'll put everything in the description box of this video, so that'll be fine. Thank you very much, Neil. This has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah, good to meet you. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, pleasure.